Hi everybody, this is Elenbaas from United Astrology. It's May 24th, and I'm here live at the United Astrology Conference in Chicago. I just got in a little bit ago, and I'm doing a video blog today to talk about this weekend's Venus-Saturn opposition. It's a pretty big transit, and so I wanted to do something to kind of update people. We did something on Venus-Saturn a little earlier in the week, but we're going to do something now and take a deeper look. I thought, first of all, I just want to show you guys so you can actually see the view from my room at the United Astrology Conference, which is really one of the biggest astrology conferences in the world, I believe. It basically is a confluence of astrology organizations putting on like the World Cup of astrology conferences. So very happy to be here and to learn and study from so many brilliant astrologers. I'll be giving a talk tomorrow at lunchtime if people are here or they're in the Chicago area. I'm giving a talk on the 5th house tomorrow, so that should be interesting. But anyway, check this out. So I'll see if I can just turn my laptop and show you the view of my hotel room. That's the Chicago city skyline right there. You can just see it out there. It's super beautiful. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised that they gave me my key to my room, and they were like, well, it's like the 25th floor or something, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I got up here and I was like, okay, I can deal with this. This is a really beautiful view. So, and I can see Lake Michigan through the cracks of the buildings here, and so I hope to take a walk and hopefully sit by the water this afternoon while it's still warm out. But at any rate, so greetings to all of you. I hope that you're all well. I want to talk about today this upcoming Venus-Saturn opposition, some really good stuff that we can check in about. So let's just, people who don't know, Venus is currently in the sign of Cancer and is about to oppose Saturn. Saturn is in the sign of Capricorn, and oppositions are said to be of the nature of Saturn. How do we get that? When you look at the natural way that aspects between whole signs are configured in the original conceptualization of rulerships, what you notice right away is that opposite to the sign of the sun and the moon, opposition being the exact opposite sign, are the signs of Saturn. So you have Aquarius opposite Leo, the sign of the sun, and you have Capricorn opposite Cancer, also the sign of Saturn. So, the opposition is said to be of the nature of Saturn. Similarly, if you were to go to the squares to the sun and the moon, on either side of the moon you go out to Aries, and the sun go out to Scorpio, and you get Mars-ruled signs. And so the square is said to be of the nature of Mars. And similarly like that for trines, you go to their signs, you get Sagittarius and Pisces, and they're of the nature of Jupiter. And sextiles, you get to Taurus and Libra, and their relationship to the sun and the moon, and that's the Venus-ruled signs. So sextiles are said to be of the nature of Venus. So we go on like that, and we understand that aspects themselves have the characteristic of a planetary energy. So oppositions are of the nature of Saturn. Saturn, in order to understand oppositions, you understand that Saturn's most general sort of archetypal quality is that of separating things. So Saturn has a long history of being associated with dogma, but not the good kind of dogma, the sectarian kind of dogma, let's say. Separating, hard divisions of things. Sometimes we say Saturn is form, but I think it may be a little bit more accurate to say that Saturn is the boundaries and the way that things get separated through boundaries. But separation, so Saturn rules orphans who are separated from family. Saturn rules groups and cliques that separate themselves from other people. Saturn rules the feeling of being an outsider or outcast, being separate from others. Saturn is the most distant, remote planet of the visible 7 planets, and is therefore the outsider of the group, is the dimmest light. So Saturn separates and divides, excludes, and casts out. Saturn is therefore whenever there's an opposition between 2 planets, you will often have some element of the 2 planets working in they're at cross purposes. It's like archetypal opposites on some level. They're functioning as though, hey, you're totally different than me, and I'm in and you're out. They're both both planets can kind of say that to one another. I'm in, you're out. I'm right, you're wrong. This kind of thing. So it's helpful to know that about oppositions, because that's why we always say there's the possibility for synthesis, which is a pretty optimistic way of saying that rather than fight about our differences and try to draw hard boundaries between opposing energies, that maybe there's some possibility for synthesis. And that may, in case, be true. Often oppositions hold the potential for the birth of some kind of new thing that comes from the tension of 2 fundamentally opposed things. So, for example, you often have groups that are very, very different from one another, and then they fight long enough until someone says, you know what, I don't think we're not so different. Let's see if we can't make something together. So someone will cross over the boundary lines, and someone from the other side will cross over the boundary lines, and before you know it, things are blending. And there's maybe the potential for some third thing to emerge. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. So there's always the possibility for some creative synthesis, the birthing of a third, the 2 opposed birthing the third. It's a very constructive way of looking at an opposition. It's not always that optimistic. Oppositions quite frequently manifest themselves as hard forms of division that are painful, exclusive, abandoning, etc. I know for myself, when I walked into this astrology conference today, I've never been someone who, when I was in graduate school, I went to a number of academic conferences. People were giving talks, and there were trade fairs, all this. If you've been to a professional conference, they're all very similar in a sense. And you can tell very quickly, if you socialize for a little while at these kinds of events, that there are different parties and there are different camps. Some people hang out over here in this type of astrology group, and some over here, and you can feel those edges, where some of those edges exist, and some of those boundaries and so forth. So I was thinking, isn't it interesting that the opening weekend, astrologically, the weekend's opening moment features Venus opposite Saturn. Here's the potential for the exploration for all of us who are here of our own cliques and factions as astrologers. So that could be something that maybe some people are exploring while they're here. It's always easy to feel a little excluded and hurt when Venus and Saturn oppose one another. Especially Venus in Cancer. Why don't we go ahead and talk about this dynamic a little bit more? Now that you have the general mood and feeling of an opposition, let's talk about Venus and Saturn. So we already know Saturn because we just talked about Saturn in order to understand the opposition. The Saturn is in Capricorn, is in its own domicile. So where are there forms, separate, divided, boundaried forms that are really in their own power? What kind of forms are like that in the world? Well, I was just at a funeral in Minneapolis My wife's grandfather passed last week, in fact, just as Uranus entered Taurus and Mars squared Uranus. So that transit started off pretty fast for me and my house. It was right away. Oh my gosh, my wife's grandfather died. So we went to Minneapolis for the funeral, and here he was a World War II veteran who fought in the Battle of the Bulge, and it was serious combat. It was someone said at the funeral it was 150% casualties in his platoon. It was 75,000 American soldiers died in that battle. Crazy, that's crazy amount of violence. He fought in that war, and then he was a really accomplished chemist, and he was a Capricorn. He was a Capricorn, and Capricorn sun anyhow. And the mass was held at a Catholic church. Really, I thought it was really sensitive, nice service, and then we went to the cemetery where they held the burial, and the military presentation was there. The military presentation of the bugle and taps and the folding of the flag, and it was very powerful. And one of my wife's uncles, who I really like, he's a professor, he was standing next to me, and he said, afterward we were talking about it, and he said, and Al's part of that. You guys ever read that book or hear that book, The Greatest Generation? I think it was by Tom Brokaw. Anyway, Al was sort of part of that generation, and we were just commenting on how he kind of was commenting on how powerful the institutions of church and state were for his generation, for my wife's grandfather's generation. And I couldn't help but think about Saturn and Capricorn, and this is a Capricorn man, so that's a good example of a Capricornian institution. Saturn in Capricorn is not just the boundaried, the sect, that which is well defined and traditional in some sense, and something that's separated out, but it's strong. Saturn in Capricorn has that strong feeling of respectability and legacy behind it, and power that comes with being a separate whole entity that you're either in or you're out. And in our day and age, one of the hallmarks of the postmodern era compared to the modern era that, say, that World War II generation grew up in, is that today the institutions that we belong to, the boundaries are not sometimes as clear. They're not as monolithic either, like church and state. Probably a lot more people today than 50, 70 years ago would not consider themselves to be really identified by church and state. We don't identify ourselves with that so much anymore. But those are powerful institutions that are mainstays in most countries in the world, church and state. And I could really feel it at the funeral. It was very powerful. If you look around at the world, what other kinds of institutions are there that, now that we participate in? Well, again, let me just turn and show you the skyline, right? There's downtown Chicago, Well, one of the institutions, of course, that is very powerful for us now is the marketplace, the global marketplace, where we can make ourselves into something, our own style, our own brand, our own YouTube channel, our own, So it's a very powerful institution. Sort of goes along with Hollywood and film and entertainment. So it's a huge global market with the ability to kind of be your own avatar. That's an institution, though, and we don't realize that. I'm participating in it right now while I'm making this live cast. But that's an institution. All of these buildings, lifestyle that we believe in, the freedom to have this lifestyle, to live among all different kinds of values, a buffet of different values and interests that you can get involved in and that you can climb to the top of. You can work hard to accomplish within the marketplace. It's a huge institution, and that's a good example of Saturn in Capricorn as well. It's funny because we have to ask ourselves, why are these so valuable to us? Like why did these things come into existence? How are they so valuable? And that's where we start understanding Venus in Cancer. Because Venus in Cancer is really about the desire on the level of the heart, the body, the mind, the emotions. Venus in Cancer is in the sign of the moon right now, and Venus in Cancer is in some ways about the desire to feel at home, to feel a sense of beauty, to feel a sense of beauty and safety, to feel a sense of belonging, to feel like you belong somewhere, in a tribe, in a group, in a family, in a culture, in a subculture, in a niche. But it's not just the group, it's the feeling you get from it. Another major institution all over the world for thousands of years is family. Family is a form of institution, but it's also one of the main reasons it endures, and it is the source of so much misery, is because we have deep emotional investment in it. So when you put Venus in Cancer, you're talking about things that we have mental, emotional, physiological love for or affection for. And yet Venus in Cancer is vulnerable. Venus in Cancer is a little fragile. So Venus in Cancer needs to take shelter of something. Venus in Cancer looks, I'll turn it again just for dramatic effect. Venus in Cancer looks at the world and says, what's the strongest, most enduring, powerful thing that I can find out there? It gives us a sense of safety or at homeness in the world. And it's really fundamentally tied to these skyscrapers and to government and to religion and to family and to the marketplace. So it's like these are, so you put these two together and you really get a really beautiful but vast understanding of the entire project of human civilization, with Venus in Cancer opposite to Saturn in Capricorn. It's like you're looking and you're understanding the heart behind why these kinds of skylines exist. Like what is it in the human heart that conjures this up? It's not just greed and consumerism and power and lust, and some of that's definitely part of it. There's also a natural tendency for, let's say, Saturn in Capricorn to feel like you have a job to do. Feeling like you have a job to do in the world gives you a sense of belonging, which feeds into Venus in Cancer, that gives you that emotional sense of love, attachment, meaning, emotional satisfaction. So people need jobs to do. It's like dogs. There's certain breeds of dogs that have been trained over thousands of years or centuries or whatnot to carry things, like to carry a load. And so when you buy these dogs, trainers will tell you, unless you plan on really working the dog is likely to be unhappy, because the dog has it in their DNA, so to speak, their genetic framework, to want to have a meaningful task to perform, and it makes them happy. Well, similarly, you have Saturn in Capricorn. You think about the task that we have. It's as solid as brick. It's as tall as this cathedral I can see right here rising up, or this dome, or the cranes that are hanging trying to fix things, or people that are rappelling down the side of a glass-faced building over there, cleaning the windows. we all have to have something that we feel gives us meaning, or that makes us feel like productive, and it feeds into this deep emotional sense that we're doing something that matters on some level, even if it's very mundane. Even it could be as simple as like dogs pulling sleds. We tend to get depressed if we don't have something to make us feel as though, hey, I'm doing something here. So similarly, we also, in addition to needing to feel like you have to have a job to do, there's also this feeling of, I'm not happy unless I'm emotionally, sentimentally attached to things. This is why just down the road here in Chicago is Soldier Field. You got military, government, state, and the pride of the city, the Chicago Bears. And I lived here in Chicago when I was just out of college. I worked here as a youth minister in the Methodist Church, and I went to a couple games, Wrigley and Soldier Field and stuff like that, and these are like, thousands of years ago, gladiator arenas, not so different. They give us all a sense of having something that emotionally makes us feel like we belong. We have to feel like we belong to something. We have to feel like we have a job to do. And it keeps linking back to the same basic forms of institution that we've created over millenniums in human history. So what kinds of tensions can arise, when you have this need to belong, this need to feel emotional attachment to something, your home team, your family, your work, your favorite golfer, your NASCAR team, or your people at an astrology conference, right? Your niche at the astrology conference, your organization at the astrology conference. Well, I came here with ESAR, or I came here with NCGR, or I'm an evolutionary astrologer, or I'm this, or these are all institutions as well. I'm a traditionalist. I'm a Hellenistic astrologer. I get into it too. So all of these things, it's very clear that very few of us do well in life without feeling like we have something meaningful to do, and feeling like we have some deep emotional form of attachment to something that we're doing that gives us love or a sense of meaning. Now, all of that being said, the tensions that can come up with Venus-Saturn are also very interesting. My group is better than yours. My team is better than yours. My clique is more refined or more sensitive than yours. Or my message or my platform is more evolved. So competitions, tribal and familial competitions and exclusivity can appear very easily in a transit like this. You can also start to emotionally want to intensify your commitment to something. Venus-Saturn opposition, you're feeling like, I'm an outsider. I need to step my game up. I got to get more emotionally on board with something here. So you want to commit more emotionally to something, but it comes often from the space of fear or anxiety about not belonging, which can then eventually turn into sectarianism, because once you do get involved in the group and you've earned your way in, you haven't properly transmuted the original, let's say the original longing or the original fear or the original lust that made you need to go out of your way to try to change yourself to belong to something. So that doesn't go away, it just stays there, and then it can turn into having a chip on your shoulder. Maybe you get a big position or a title in the group that you covet, and then, at a certain point that you've built yourself up and you feel like you belong and you're a big deal. But the underlying feeling of inadequacy has never been addressed. It'll turn up somehow. So we always have to look at this kind of stuff when we look at Venus and Saturn oppositions, or squares too, to a certain extent, because it's very easy to want to develop stronger emotional attachment to something out of a feeling of inadequacy or a feeling of lack. So clicks, exclusivity, the desire to commit to something more deeply, but perhaps informed by fear of abandonment, fear of inadequacy. There's also suspicion of outsiders. This is a transit that can manifest in terms of prejudice, all different kinds of prejudice. But the fear or suspicion of people who are not within the emotional and formal framework that we prefer or that makes us feel safe. So again, it can manifest in terms of different varying degrees of prejudice. It can also turn into, you can have another, how can I put this? Sometimes when we fear what's different, we interrogate it. We look for a weakness. We look for something that's wrong. We try to spot out the blemish. See, Venus is what's pure and what's clean and what's beautiful, and Saturn is the blemish, what's ugly, what's missing, what's left out. So the two, opposed to one another, can manifest in terms of hunting for the flaw, in the diamond. Maybe that's a good thing. Sometimes we need a toothbrush to clean the bathroom floor. So this can be a time to clean, or a time for intense scrutiny of something, maybe editing, or a change of style, or a change of aesthetic approach, or something like that, because you're examining it from a distance, from an objective, colder, more critical distance, like Saturn. And that could be a good thing, but it can also be about fault finding. When people hear, oh boy, he's getting into astrology, or she's getting into yoga, or this person's getting into something, they're my friend or they're my family member, and it's something a little different than what I'm used to, or something a little different than what I know about. There becomes a tendency to jump to conclusions, rush to assumptions, imagine that this has something to do with us, rather than seeking to understand why someone might be wanting to study astrology or do whatever it is that they're doing. And instead, we might make it about ourselves, or we might make a short list of critical questions to ask, to make sure that they aren't straying too far from our little nest of familiarity and comfort. So we do this like that. We scrutinize. And in the family, we can do that too. Within families, within groups or organizations, you can start to unfairly criticize what's different. You have to watch for that tendency. So those are some of the big things to watch for under the Venus-Saturn opposition. There's also some interesting things like timeless beauty and nostalgia. Saturn is time. And Saturn is also related to the Golden Age. Saturn was once the ruler of the Golden Age, but then was usurped by Zeus. And so Saturn is a great planet to understand the ideal of timelessness. That's why Saturn is related to great mystics and contemplatives and people who study transcendental consciousness, like astrologers, like yogis, mystics. Saturn is a funny planet in that regard. A lot of people get Saturn a little bit wrong when they say that Saturn is just like a cold, hard literalist. The history of astrology does not bear that out entirely. Saturn is also a great mystic that sits on the edge between the known and the unknown. Is a gatekeeper to liminal spaces and alternate dimensions of consciousness and so forth. So Saturn similarly can take us out of the known and into far-reaching places, which is quite amazing. But yeah, there's sometimes when that happens, when Saturn invites us into some space that's beyond the known, there is fear. Again, fear of leaving, fear of having to leave behind different kinds of attachments. So You can also think of Venus Saturn opposition in terms of the call to go to someplace unknown or someplace that's different, some foreign territory, and basically the emotional difficulty that you might have in going someplace that's totally new and remote to you. It's like being a stranger in a foreign land. So, all right, let's see if I have any questions here before I keep going. There's more to say, but let's just I'm not seeing any. I can't seem to move my, oh, here we go. Okay. I don't see any questions yet. So, all right. So at any rate, let's see. Let me just look at my notes. Well, unless I have any questions, then what I want to do is talk about, what is the possibility for synthesis here? What is the possibility for spiritual understanding? What kind of spiritual teaching does this give us? Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, look out for all of this stuff, look out for all of these different sort of patterns. But it's another thing to say, how do we dovetail this astrological moment with spiritual life and spiritual growth? What does that look like? How do you use or navigate a transit like this spiritually for the sake of your spiritual development? So that's a really good question. Let's just see here. So I wanted to read you guys something. This is from the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. This is Krishna describing what it means to be practicing devotional yoga, sometimes called bhakti yoga. He's talking to Arjuna, and this is what Krishna says. Now, you could think of Krishna as like an avatar, an incarnation of God. So Krishna says, just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. So first and simple instruction in this passage is just fix your mind upon me. Just fix your mind upon God or the divine, whatever word is comfortable to you there. And engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. The first starts off really simple, almost to the point where it sounds impossibly simple. Like, how am I supposed to just fix my mind and my intelligence in God constantly, and then I'll be fine, right? Like, it sounds really hard. Well, then Krishna starts going down from there. Next thing he says is, my dear Arjuna, a winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulated principles of bhakti yoga. In this way, you will develop a desire to attain to me. So first he says the highest thing is basically just to love me and be absorbed in me. But if you can't do that, then you follow the rules. And the rules will gradually help you develop a desire for attachment to me. Then he keeps going down. If you can't practice the regulations of bhakti yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you'll come to the perfect stage. So this is another step down. If you can't do that, then just try to do something with your life, use your energy, your actions in the world towards something that is in my service, something that is virtuous and in the name or spirit of serving the divine and serving other people in the world. Do something with your life. Use your energy and just kind of put your back into doing something spiritual for a living, or maybe not for a living, but just do something spiritual with your life. Do spiritual activities, It says, next one down, if, however, you're unable to work in this consciousness, then try to act, giving up all results of your work, and try to be self-situated. So then he says, basically, like, if you can't do that, and let's say you're going to go about just living a pretty in a sense, sort of materialistic life, and that's the best. And the best you can do then maybe is just the stuff that you earn and get from living that materialistic life. Just give stuff that you get, give it back to charity, give it back to God. So just that could be a step down. That'll help you. He goes down from there. If you can't take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. So the next thing he says is, okay, so you're going to be in the material world, just living your material life, and you can't even give me stuff that you earn. Then just try to become more intelligent. Try to cultivate your intelligence in your mind, right? And try to understand the difference maybe between the material world and your eternal soul, like in developing intelligence. Don't if you can't do that, then just try to be smarter. Like really simple, right? Coming down. He says better than knowledge, however, is meditation. And better than meditation is the renunciation of fruits of action. For by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. So this is better than trying to get smart, is just trying to get quiet. And if you can't do that, right, then again, just try not to have expectations in life. So we go from be totally absorbed in me, just fully absorbed in me, in love and in your mind and heart, down to if you can't do that, then what was the next one down? Follow the regulative practices of bhakti yoga. But follow the rules of yoga and it'll come. Oh, if you can't do that, then just try to do something spiritual in the world with your actions. If you can't do that, then try to get smarter. However, better than trying to just develop your intelligence would be to just try to get quiet. And if you can't get quiet, then better than that would be to stop expecting things in life, to just go with the flow a little bit more. He just keeps going down. So there's a whole gradation of things, but notice what's at the very, very top. At the very, very top of that description of spiritual life, Krishna says, just be absorbed, mind and heart, in me. Think of all of the things. Again, I'll just turn so we can see this view, right? Here it is. It's beautiful. It's very, very beautiful. What a work of art we humans have concocted. It's also ugly and terrible. It's all of it, right? But we spend most of our lives looking for the right group, the right family, the right organization, the right job, the right marriage, the right, we look for a deep need for emotional, loving attachment to something, Venus in Cancer. And we look to have some meaningful form of activity and work and groups or structures that we can belong to and take shelter under that will give us that feeling. That's what we do with our lives. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says that basically we've been doing that since time immemorial. We've been doing that for maybe billions of lifetimes. That's what living entities do, from fish in the ocean to human beings. We all do different versions of that same exact thing, seeking for attachment, comfort, safety, shelter within things that are safe, that give us a sense of temporary meaning and purpose. But eventually, any shelter in the material world, like all these skyscrapers, they fall apart. They need constant maintenance because they're always falling apart. And eventually this whole city will be gone. Lake Michigan will be gone. Our solar system will be gone, right? But Krishna says your eternal soul will still be there. And so round and round you go throughout endless universes of different forms and different places, and you can just keep going. But Krishna says the bottom line is that you're always looking for that. You're always looking for that sense of home and belonging and taking shelter of temporary things or building things to give us a sense of purpose. And so the answer from the perspective of, the yogic perspective is to try developing on some level, no matter how basic it might be. And that's why he gives those whole list of gradations. On some level, just try to be attached in your heart to something that's eternal. Be attached to God, eternal love, eternal peace. It has no form, yet it's in everything. Developing love and attachment for that, even if you start with very, very, very basic things, is said to be something that gradually transports you from searching endlessly in all of these material worlds to finding your home back in the spiritual world. Now, you may or may not jive with any of that theologically or metaphysically, may not be your gig. But that's the spiritual teaching that I'll share for the day. So you can consider that. But with this Venus-Saturn opposition, it's a great moment to catch ourselves as we're trying to feel like we fit in or feel, like we belong somewhere, and feel like we don't belong somewhere, to scrutinize or to feel scrutinized, all of these things. It's a great moment to try doing something really different, which is to let go of our emotional attachments to all of these things, even if for just a few hours, all of these things that we belong to, that we think mean so much, and consider instead that you're already at home. And if you can tap into the piece of divinity that's living in your heart, then you're at home all the time. There's nothing to build. There's nothing that one ounce of effort in the material sense, though these endeavors are part of what we're here to do, but no effort in the material sense could deliver you a feeling that is already there. So just something to think about, because again, it's very easy to get lost in the feeling of needing to belong or not belonging on a Venus-Saturn opposition. So that's the message for today. I hope this was a good meditation that gives you all some good things to think about. I certainly enjoy being here, and this is no diss to the city of Chicago or to being human. I'm human and I'm in Chicago, so So at any rate, but I hope you all have a very lovely day, and I will try to broadcast something again tomorrow from UAC. Maybe some more thoughts on Venus-Saturn. We'll see what comes up. All right, everyone. Take care. And if you have stories to share as well, please leave your comments on this feed or send me an email or a message or something. I love hearing from people and just hearing how these stories play out and what they see, and how whatever we're talking about in these discussions, these talks I'm doing, fit with the stories that you're living. Because I think I learn a whole lot from not just giving these talks, but from hearing back from people. So, all right, take care, everyone. Peace.